I'm coming at you live on tape from Sydney, Ohio. And today we're talking Scott Hall, also known as Razor Ramon, and why he initially went into Hall of Fame as a singles wrestler under the Razor Ramon moniker and not under the Scott Hall moniker, his real name. Now, there's been many theories thrown out there, so there's no official explanation. So I'm going to throw out a few theories today as to why he went in there under Razor Ramon and not under Scott Hall, which he later did go in there under Scott Hall with the NWO, but this was his initial singles going in there under Razor Ramon. Now, the first theory is that Vince McMahon liked the gimmick of Razor Ramon. Now, when Scott Hall first came to WWF, they pitched a different gimmick to him, which I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't very good. So Scott Hall, being a big fan of the movie Scarface, came up with the gimmick of Razor Ramon on the fly, based on the character of Scarface, or the lead character in Scarface, whose name I don't remember. I've only seen that movie once. It was okay. It is not a movie I'm going to base my life around, unlike some other people. So I pitched the character of Razor Ramon as this Cuban who is the bad guy, who is a bad guy and flings a toothpick and does all this other stuff. Well, Vince loved the idea. While Scott Hall was the whitest Cuban you've probably ever seen, the character, he ran with the character, and it became a big hit. He eventually turned face, and he had a big run as Razor Ramon as this Cuban character, Razor Ramon. Now, when he went to WCW, he wrestled as Scott Hall, but he kept a lot of the traits of Razor Ramon, which almost got WCW sued. Well, which did get WCW sued. So he dropped the accent, but he still kept the flicking the toothpick, and he was still electric on the mic, just as he was in WWF. There's a second theory, this one I came up with, that has to do with Scott Hall's addictions. Now, as a lot of us know, some of you may not know, Scott Hall was an alcohol and drug addict. Scott Hall actually went to rehab for alcohol addiction in WCW. He got out and he kept drinking, which was not what WCW paid for rehab for. And that led to him getting fired from WCW for being an alcoholic, because his drinking was out of control. And that's when he later went to ECW and went to a couple other independent companies and was not seen in WCW again because he got fired for alcohol and drugs. He later went to WWF when the NWO invasion happened with him, Kevin Nash, and Hulk Hogan. And I don't remember if they sent him to rehab. I think they did, but I don't think he completed it. But during the plane ride from hell, which I think is going to be next week's video, Scott Hall harassed a stewardess in the air before getting drunk and passing out. And the fallout from that plane ride was several WWE wrestlers were released, including Scott Hall. Though Scott Hall was the least deserving of the release, because he just harassed the stewardess and got drunk and passed out. So he was the least deserving of the release. That led to his release due to, once again, his alcohol and drug problems. So my theory is though DDP got him sober later on with Jake the Snake Roberts, him and Jake the Snake got sober with DDP, and he was sober at the time of his Hall of Fame induction, was WWE was did not want to directly put Scott Hall into the WWF Hall of Fame because knowing of his alcohol and drug problems, they didn't want to risk it being an issue, putting an alcohol and drug addict into the Hall of Fame because he could relapse, which he did near the end of his life. They put him in as Razor Ramon, a character fondly remembered and not remembered as being an alcohol and drug addict. Now, a few years later, when he was still sober, or they thought he was sober, he actually was not when the NWO went into the Hall of Fame. He actually was back on alcohol and drugs. They put the NWO in the Hall of Fame with him in it. But when the NWO made their final appearance in WWE, he was actually on drugs again because he had relapsed. And as addicts know, like myself, and like if you're an addict or you know an addict, it is very hard to stay sober. I've managed it for about 3-4 years now from drugs, and from alcohol about, I gotta think, 6 years now. And I relapsed on the alcohol once after I quit the first time when my older brother died. So it's very, very hard to stay sober. It's sometimes all you think about is doing drugs and alcohol. So that's my theory on why they put Razor Ramon into the Hall of Fame. Whether either of those two theories are correct, who knows? Maybe they just thought, we're saving putting Scott Hall. We don't want him to be a double Hall of Fame inductee. So we'll put Razor Ramon in, and then we'll put Scott Hall in with the NWO or with the Outsiders. Who knows? But those are some theories as to why Razor Ramon went in and why they later put Scott Hall in. Next week, guess what? We're going to talk about the plane ride from hell and all the wrestlers who got fired from it. And why what Ric Flair did on the plane ride from hell was way worse than what Scott Hall did. So join me next week.